more progress now, yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Still have a long way to go. They promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Instead is now on its way. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Selectmen will help us all out. They promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Winchester's now on its way.
I'm not positive. It's a jam-packed program once again. I played the song up front because I've been asked by a lot of people to play it. That's the one I took and changed the words to, and I'll keep changing the words to it as we move along, as long as I keep having the programs and we make progress. Today we got a great show. There's a lot of progress has been made. First thing I'll do is make a few comments. You'll see Sherlock Holmes up there in the back of me. Today I've got a couple 100-year-old pipe here, part of my Sherlockiana collection, and it's the kind of pipe he used to smoke. It's a meerschaum, and I got it in England at some antique store many years ago. I have another prop here, which I'll show later when we get farther into the show. Then I'm going to talk about the exceptional progress that we've been making in the last 5 weeks or so with the new selectmen and the new team. And we're very, very tickled pink with that. They're really making some progress. I'm going to talk about the critical path for the Quantum Leap, which is the Enterprise Corridor. We talked about that last week. I want you to know this week I prepared for 60 hours a whole program, and the other night I woke up about 1 in the morning and with a brilliant idea to change the whole program, so I've done that. I stayed up all night in the coffee shops writing the program, and we got snowed out yesterday, so I'm here on Friday afternoon recording it. Then I'm going to talk a bit about my view on what I would do and how I think we can move forward. I'm going to talk a bit about the critical activities for the Enterprise Corridor, other activities that are necessary as well. At the same time, we call those the non-critical activities, which may become critical if we're not careful. I'm going to have a chart, show you what a CPM chart looks like, critical path method chart I've been using for about 50 years, and the technique, not the chart. And then I'm going to talk a bit about a benefit of this approach. And then I went to go to a meeting the other night, and I won't tell you which one it was, but there was a meeting, went on until about 11:30 at night. So I went home and I wrote up another couple slides, which are called How to Run an Efficient Meeting. I don't think meetings should go till 11:30. It's not fair on the people who attend and want to be there, and it's not fair on the commissioners who have to get up at 5 in the morning to go to work. So I'm going to talk a bit about that, and I hope it's something that will help you. I want to add a couple little comments first. I was going to talk about them at more length, but tonight I can just touch on them. One is facts. And businessmen, and hence the majority of our newly appointed selectmen, prefer to deal with facts, not supposition. There have been some instances of statements where facts have or can be questioned at the selectmen meetings. And I think I saw 4 or 5 examples of that. If I get time in the future, I'll go over those. But there's even little things that don't count too much, like how much somebody is paying on their reval, which was off by about a pretty good percentage. So it also got in the paper. I read the paper today, and it had a fallacious number in there. So I think people have to be careful when they deal at the selectmen meetings, and they always make sure they check their facts out first. Because I can tell you, the businessmen are checking the facts out and will continue to do so. Responsibility. I saw in the paper over the last week or two where the Board of Education, which has been delegated the responsibility of dealing with the contractual negotiations with the unions and the arbitrators. There are some comments in there that were made by people, well, at least one person from the Board of Education, that perhaps shouldn't have been made in the paper. My view is, when you're delegated authority, this goes for everybody in town that works in town, not just the Board of Education, but when you're delegated authority, you should get on with it. Accept that responsibility and get on with it. And don't make any unhelpful comments, especially to the newspapers, because that doesn't help our image. And it's part of this hospitality theory that I keep telling you about. We can't be making those kind of comments. Let's work it out within our own home. If you've got a question, just call somebody and talk to them about it, or have a meeting with them. Don't run to the newspapers. That's like running to daddy. We don't like to run to daddy in business. Today's guest is Sherlock Holmes. Pictures in the background at 221B Upper Baker Street, London, England, where now a statue stands, and I used to go by it every day a few years ago when I was consulting over in England. Down in the city of London. Actually, Upper Baker Street isn't in the city of London, it's in the outskirts there, but I was staying in an apartment in that area. It was rented by the company. The Study in Scarlet was the first where we introduced Sherlock Holmes. Arthur Conan Doyle introduced him. Remember, I told you once before, he was patterned after one of Conan Doyle's teachers at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and his name was Dr. Joseph Bell. And he actually practiced a lot of these techniques that were used. And there is a quote in one of his first handwritten drafts of A Study in Scarlet. I'm not even positive it made it into the final, but it said, "I must say," he's quoting Sherlock Holmes here, "I must say that I have no patience with people who build up fine theories in their armchairs which can never be reduced to practice." Tonight we're going to be talking a lot about evolution versus revolution in practice in the city, in the town of Winchester. So I thought that would be a pretty appropriate quotation. As Sherlock Holmes would say, we in the town of Winchester, city of Winchester, town of Winchester, city of Winston, I keep getting them mixed up. This is a two-pipe problem. Sherlock Holmes always, always assigned pipe value to all his problems, and I think this is probably a 2-pipe problem, and I'm not positive of that, but it could be a 10-pipe problem, but we'll find out as we go along. So now I want to talk a bit about the selectmen and the exceptional progress they've been making. First, I'll tell you, I want to remind you of what the problem we have and the problem is, over the last 10 years, as I've been saying all along here for my 12 programs, we have been breaking even at best, while our town has been fighting deterioration despite the gallant efforts of those concerned. A lot of people trying to do good here, but because we were poor, and breaking even for 10 years, we really don't have the money to do a lot of things. The solution, in my opinion, accelerate the revenue growth by expanding the taxpayer base responsibly as rapidly as possible. As I said last week, it's not just good enough to grow the net grand list. You got to grow it with profitable, more taxpayers that aren't a big drain on the town, and pay a hefty amount of tax. So that's what we're looking for, and we can evolve to it, and we have to evolve to it. We have no other choice. But we're also saying part of our evolution should be a grand leap or two somewhere along the way. Okay, since they've been appointed or elected, the new selectmen have brought us a sense of urgency second to none. These guys are working hard. They're just like everybody else in town. They're donating their time. They have full-time businesses to run. But boy, they're spending a lot of time, nights and weekends, just like everybody else that's trying to help the town. And they have a tremendous sense of urgency, and they really have been working hard, and they know they have to move quickly. Some people are concerned about that, but don't be concerned about it, because when you're in intensive care, the doctors need to move quickly, and so do the nurses. Number two, there's the rapid yet responsible decision making. They are making decisions. Remember, I talked about results orientation a bit last week, not as much as I wanted to, but matter of fact, since I see he's got the camera over there, I better put up this slide for you. I sometimes lose track of where the cameras are, but so we have rapid yet responsible decision making. We really need to make decisions, and we need to make them fast, because we're going down the slope of that triangle, and all the tough decisions are in the beginning, not at the end. So that's what's happening now. They have a thirst for the facts. They want to know facts. I mentioned earlier in the program, facts are very important. When I first started in business, a fellow in Italy gave me a Pinocchio. I still have it at home. Maybe I'll bring it in next week and show it to you. Pinocchio, he said to me, Brian, you need to always concentrate on the facts, and you make sure your nose doesn't grow like Pinocchio. And he gave me the Pinocchio. I've had it all these years. I still have it at my house, and one of my favorite collections is a little Pinocchio collection. We've got one hanging now on our Christmas tree. Thirst for the facts. Gotta deal with facts, and it is, you know, if you don't deal with facts and you get caught out, then people won't believe you anymore after that, and you won't be very influential. You gotta check for facts. When somebody tells me that they pay so much, or they got so much increase in their evaluation, I go look at it on the computer and I see what the real fact is. And in some cases it's accurate, some cases it isn't. Great attention to detail. Well, I brought with me tonight Sherlock Holmes's magnifying glass. We use that, and we go out and we look for detail. So we can't sit high or in our armchair here. We've got to get out, and we've got to get down and dive like a heron does for the fish, right? We got to get down there, and we got to get in amongst the detail on the critical path activities and make sure we help, and that's what they're doing now. So you'll see them at meetings. You'll see them reading minutes. And somebody brought up at the meeting a couple meetings ago, maybe it was last meeting, a certain point, and the mayor said, no, that's not a fact. I read the minutes, and I know that's not true. So we got to be very careful about what we say here and make sure we read the minutes and we know what the facts should be. Personal involvement. These people are getting personally involved. I've seen the mayor in 4 or 5 meetings here in the last couple of weeks, and the selectmen from both parties, not all the selectmen, but some of the selectmen from each party, we're in these meetings, and I'm very happy to see that, because that's how you learn. You go and you read minutes, and you go and you talk to people, and you get out amongst people. It's you can't just wait for people to come to you. You got to go out searching for facts, great attention to detail, personally, right? And that's what Sherlock Holmes did, and that's what we're going to do. Personal attention to detail is also very important. Not just attention to detail, but it has to be personal attention to detail, and we need to check things out. In a little over a month, these people have only been in charge since November 6th. That's about 5 or 6 weeks, five and a half weeks, I don't know exactly, but since then, number one, they've assumed the responsibility of the majority. They didn't shirk any responsibility. They took it right on. They changed the direction of the town leaders the same way, from the potential of incurring large debt with a big bond issue to a focus of dramatically increasing the revenue of the town by adding significantly to the tax base as soon as practical in a responsible manner. They think that's the number priority. They're involved in that, and they're really trying to help us out by personally getting involved in all those activities that they think might bring us this revenue. As I mentioned, they stopped the bond package, and it was approximately $57 million commitment to the town. That's stopped now. They disbanded the school building committee and established a new, smaller building committee, 5 people, with a lot of help from experts around town, like people from the different aspects of it. And they already have held 2 meetings, and they're moving on a plan for correcting the civil rights citation and getting it done way beforehand, if possible, for a reasonable amount of money at the Pearson School. They've held 2 meetings to date. This new team of selectmen have negotiated the resignation of the town manager and appointed a new acting town manager. Now, I want to make a couple points about that. When I was working in the last 4 companies or so that I was a very senior executive in, were bought out. You know, Telerate was bought out by Dow Jones. NYNEX was bought out by Bell Atlantic. Previous companies of mine were bought out by other companies, and whenever that happened, people wanted to bring in their own management, and they wanted to have people that, for one reason or another, they would feel more comfortable in the job. So no aspersion on anybody's character or anything. I would go to and just say, okay, if you have somebody that you would feel more comfortable with, I'd be happy to leave. And usually, of course, I had a contract, so I was paid for the rest of my contract. Now, let me just say something to you. I think about it an awful lot when I look back on my life. I always came out ahead. I never, ever, I always felt bad when I had to leave the company that I thought was doing quite well, but I always ended up with a better job in a more exciting area and a more exciting location and a better compensation package and a lot more responsibility. So I'm wishing these people well that leave and go on and to better places. Next, they gave a very strong recommendation, very strong, to planning and zoning to change the approach 180 degrees to the upgrade of the plan of conservation and development to a new evolutionary one. I'm not going to talk too much about that aspect of it because I'm going to talk a lot about other things tonight there. But last time I talked quite a bit about that. I saw it as a big breakthrough. The newspaper saw it as a big breakthrough, and we think we're tickled pink with that. And they asked them to accept the help and suggestions of a major developer to expedite the process. So we need a more evolutionary approach, and you saw Darwin last week. We need that, and we need a major developer to expedite the process. You know, when we talk about this, almost everything you do in life is evolutionary. If you're going to try to build your body, it's evolutionary. It doesn't happen overnight. An education doesn't happen overnight. Learning a musical instrument or even anything about music doesn't happen overnight. Growing as a person doesn't happen overnight. And you can probably list thousands of things. Now, there are some things that are revolutionary that we must do in a revolutionary manner, like build a new house, but even that turns out to be kind of evolutionary because we always put off as much of it as we can until we can afford it. We might build a house and leave certain rooms empty or rec rooms empty or not build a garage or something like that. So there is a tinge of evolution even when you build a new house. So I want to make that very strong. The next thing they did was they established a Charter Revision Commission. That's already established and had its first meeting. The next meeting will be on the 9th of January, where the public is invited in the band room of Pearson School. Everybody's welcome. I encourage everybody to come to that meeting and get your 2 cents in one way or the other and listen to everybody else's comments on this. In addition, I know I will be. I'm on the commission. I'm going to be out there talking to everybody I can in town and looking for ideas and trying to find out what the notion of the town is. I saw in the local Winston paper today where Mr. I think his name is McCarthy, I'm not positive, but he made some comments about it, what he thought about it. But everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and now's the time to get your 2 cents in. The next thing is they appointed people. By the way, the charter thing is going to take quite a while. It's not going to happen overnight. There will be another public hearing when a first draft of the new charter is put together. They appointed officers, and they set a sort of a schedule for the first meeting at least the other day. They also appointed people with a great deal of development experience to liaise with the major land use commissions. You know, I've talked a lot about that on our programs here. That's part of the whole thing. I mean, why appoint somebody to deal with a commission that's never, ever done any development? Doesn't make any sense. So now we've got these developers are now interfacing with the major land use commissions. They know a lot about it. Probably know more about it than most of the commissioners themselves, not all of them. I'm sure some of them are just up to speed too, but And especially when the commissions are changing people all the time, it helps to have somebody interfacing from the Board of Selectmen who really knows what they're talking about. So I really think in 5 weeks, these guys have done wonders, and the one lady that's on the Selectmen, they all did a good job. We're going in the right direction. We're heading down the slope, and I'm really tickled pink with that. So now, here we go. We're going to put up the next slide, which is the next point on the agenda, which is dealing with the enterprise corridor. That's on the critical path. We're going to be talking a lot about the critical path tonight towards getting our revenue in. And as we said last week, getting some papers off to the state for the Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of the Environment to get our permission so that we can get on with this, with these developments on the Hill. That's in our own backyard. We have to make some decisions, and we have to get on with it, and we have to give information to the state and resolve some problems that are very important. So what I'm going to do right now is say that a presentation was made this week by Selectman Ham, and with some comments by Selectman Capabianca, and some comments by the attorney for the developer, Mr. Pearlie Grimes. Remember, they offered some help, free help from the developer to help get this thing moving along faster. So they were there at the meeting. Questions and answers and discussion occurred during the meeting. And there was public comment, which is mostly these people I told you about. Nobody else made many public comments. But the commission will read the material and discuss at their meeting on December 17th. That's Monday, 2007. My view was it was a good meeting. It was conducted very professionally. Somebody was running around with a camera taping it. But otherwise, I thought it was that was a bit of a distraction. Otherwise, I thought it was a good meeting, and it was professionally conducted. Didn't last forever, and what they did say was the next time they will bring it up on the agenda right away, and they'll discuss it on Monday's meeting. Now, Monday meeting is also the selectmen meeting, so I wouldn't expect to see many selectmen at the next meeting, but at least they'll be there and they'll be discussing it. I'll go along to that just so I can report on it fairly. The second thing that happened this week was there was a non-point education meeting, a non-point education for municipal officials meeting called NEMO from the University of Connecticut, and they held a workshop on Tuesday, December 11th, 2007. I popped into that for a little while, but I got the gist of what was going on, so I didn't stay too long. Anything past 6 o'clock at night is past my bedtime. I'm usually up at 1 or 2 in the morning working on the show stuff when it's nice and quiet, so I get to bed kind of early. But anyway, I stayed up past my bedtime, and I went down there, and a presentation was made that was strongly confirmed the evolutionary approach that we discussed last time, and that was recommended by the selectmen to P&Z. And they couldn't have been stronger on that whole thing. And their basic idea was, hey, let's not wait to do a big bang approach. Now let's not sit in our armchair. Let's get out and let's get an evolutionary approach going. It's better for everybody. I happen to always agree with that. Most businessmen do. Not many people want to sit around for a long time, costs a lot of money, and then find out later that, hey, wait a minute, we didn't think of everything. And you know, you can sit here now, no matter how much you try to plan, you won't think of everything. It isn't until you get out in the bushes that you begin to find out what's really happening and what you need to do. So we need to evolve that. A handout was available. I do have a copy of that handout if anybody wants a copy, or you can get one from the people down at the Planning and Zoning Department. It was a very, very good presentation. The mayor and at least 3 selectmen were present, as well as members of the various land use boards. The meeting was very professional and positive during the portion that I attended. The P&Z meetings and agendas are available, and I'll put this up on the chart for you so you can see, but I'll read it off as well. The P&Z meeting minutes and agendas are available on the Town of Winchester website. You can also get other things there too. When you get on there, you'll see. Once they're ready for distribution. They don't have to wait to be approved. They just have to be ready for distribution. They go on the website. So if you go to the townofwinchester.org, you click on government, you click on meeting minutes and agendas, and then you select the P&Z minutes or agenda for the next meeting, if it's there, and or any of the other, like inland wetland meetings or any of the other meetings that are posted, you can get on there and I think it's a real good thing. So if you want any information, read the minutes of this thing. You should read as I'll show you tonight, you should read those meetings every 2 weeks or whatever, whenever there's a meeting, so you can see exactly what's happening, and you can get the facts, and you can get down to the detail, and you don't have to rely on other people. The person who takes the meetings is wonderful. She does a best job on minutes I've seen in a long time. Not to disparage anybody else who also does a good job, but she really does a good job, and they're a pleasure to read. So it's not a drudgery to read these minutes, it's a pleasure to read them. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is moving forward. Okay, and what do we need to do to move forward here? Because we're on the critical path. Moving forward, we need to drop down to the detail. We need to get out our magnifying glass and get to know all the detail and get down there, and then when we come back to the top again, we can make intelligent decisions. So we drop down to the detail. We define the critical path of the activities with timescales of each that are necessary to get the major permits from the Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of the Environment. And to be into the ground, as the developers like to say. When they're going to be into the ground, digging holes to put in the water and sewer and building the roads and things. And we'd like to be into the ground by May 1st of 2008, because that's, you got to get going. And the quicker we get going, the better off we're going to be. I'll show you a timeline of that later. Number two, we need to manage the process with a sense of urgency. There's that word again, sense of urgency. And a dedication needed to achieve the end date. It's not going to come about by wishy-washy. Everybody's got to be dedicated. We all got to be pulling for it, and it's like going to the moon. We all got to help. And if there's anybody that isn't helping, then we've got to find them another activity that's not on the critical path, because we need everybody helping here. Suggestions on what needs to be done to accomplish this project. I'm going to give you a few suggestions. These are Brian's suggestions. They might not do this. There are other ways you can do it. I'm sure they'll have to take some of this advice, and if not, that's okay. It's up to them. Number one, you have to define the activities necessary and make them very visible to everybody. And then you have to show them what the critical path, and I'm going to do that tonight, an example, not the final, but what a critical path of the plan is. And that has to be done. The second thing that has to be done is you have to assign dates. And you usually do that when you're planning these types of things. You usually assign the dates from the end date backwards. You don't start in the beginning and define dates. You say, what is our objective? What is our goal? And you put that date down. As I just said, that's May 1st of 2008 for planning purposes. Might not end up there, might not be the final date. But if it pushes into next winter, then that slows the whole thing down again. So they want to get moving and move as fast as possible. So that's okay. So the dates we need to assign. I'll show you an example in a few minutes. The next thing we need to do is ask the developer and other organizations for free assistance and help. There was a lot of talk at the meeting the other night about how busy people are and their volunteers and why we didn't do this before and we couldn't get the money, all kinds of reasons. Okay, I've heard those reasons all over the world from all different people and languages and everything else. And here's how you normally approach it. You ask the developer and other organizations for free assistance and help. And you accept help that has already been offered, which I hope they do. I'm going to talk more, I hope, if we don't run out of time, more about that number 3, because I got some specific examples there. The next thing, number 4, is ask political parties, the Taxpayers Association, and the public to lobby their state representatives and other connections to help expedite the process at the state level. We can work on our activities and we can muster resources, but it's harder when you get up to the state or in federal government. Then you got to lobby. You got to get in there with the best of your representatives and your town management, and you got to say, we need an answer. We're going to give you the thing on X date. We want an answer by Y date. And then when I was in California trying to make payrolls, I used to put people on an airplane with flowers and candy, send them to Washington, D.C., and say, don't come back without the check because we got a payroll to meet on Friday. And that's the kind of thing we have to do, and give them the air cover, get in there at the state level and the federal level and find out, speed up things at that level, which is a tough task. Number 4, ask political, I'm sorry, I got the numbers wrong here, but number 5 is appoint one person in the P&Z commission. I got a little slide later, if I can get to it, about how to speed up a lot of these commission things and get them done, but appoint one person on the P&Z commission, preferably someone that can devote the time, a retired person or somebody that can devote the time, maybe somebody who's got time off in the summer or things like that, to be responsible for this activity until P&Z is off the critical path, right? So that's the way I would approach it. I would find somebody who can spend the time, and I'd say, you get in there, you make sure everything gets done, and then help us so we don't have to do it all at the meetings. Do it between meetings, and we'll give you decisions from meeting to meeting if we have to, and if you need one quicker, get us all on the phone, and we'll do a telephone meeting and give you the permission to move forward or answer your questions. So that is very important. The next thing I want to say is, and I kind of skipped over it before, was we need to overlap activities wherever possible in our planning so that we can we can do things in parallel. And that's one of my expediting the solution things, is to, do things in parallel wherever you can. So we need to overlap activities wherever possible, and try to do our best to do that. Get many people working in parallel. We talked about that as one of our techniques. Here I'm showing you all these techniques we've been talking about are beginning to be applied here for the town's business if people take me up on my suggestions. And then speed up the decision-making and approval process with P&Z, the Army Corps of Engineers, DEP, the state, the town, and the development people. They're all involved. They all got a stake in this. We call them stakeholders in business. They all want to make it happen, and they should be meeting, which they are to a great extent. I'm not trying to say they're not. But we got to help them, and we got to remove any obstacles that we can to make sure they can get their job done. Now, suggestions from Brian on how to proceed. Again, these are my suggestions. Hold special meetings. Draft helpers from the ranks of other commissions, say economic development, for example, and the public. Ask the developers and other organizations. Ask the developers and other organizations to help you out. Take help wherever you can get it, and don't be bashful about that. That's very important that you do that. So that's kind of what I had on that. I don't think I have any more on how to proceed, but we've talked a bit about it. So and I might even talk a little bit more about it later. But anyway, the next thing I want to talk about, and the real meat here, it's sort of halfway through the show, so I want to get into this. I'm going to put together for you, I worked with Mr. Selectman Mike Ham, and we spent a lot of time on this week. Most of this are his ideas. I just helped get it down on a piece of paper so I could explain it to everybody. And I can tell you right now, it's not the exact critical path. This is just a sample to show you how these things are usually done and how this can be done. And I'm sure that tomorrow, when everybody looks over what I've done here, they'll find other things that aren't on here, things that can't be done in the time frames I suggest, all that kind of thing. But that all can be fixed. But this is, again, is getting it going. Let's get it evolving. And the way, first thing you got to do is you got to have an embryo. Well, this is the embryo for the plan. And I call it critical activities. The first critical activity is planning and zoning to update the current plan for conservation and development, and they call that the POCD, considering the suggested changes recommended by the developer, and it handed over to the selectmen before January 1, 2008. The sooner the better. Now, they might decide for some reason not to do that, but that's something political that I can't get involved in, or town business that I can't get involved in, but by January 1, we have to have that handed over, or we're not going to make this plan for May 1st. So now, the second thing that has to happen is the selectmen need to hold a special meeting. Once they get it on January 1st, they need to hold a special meeting and review and comment on the updated version of the POCD and pass it back to P&Z by January 5th. That's not much time. They'll have to have a special meeting or a phone meeting, and they'll have to go over it and decide what they want to hand back, give comments to P&Z or not, whatever, okay? And then they will hand it back to P&Z on January 5th, and then P&Z will incorporate any changes recommended by the selectmen and schedule a public hearing. They have to do this by charter a public hearing incorporating changes and pass that back to the selectmen with comments, etc., by January 20th. And they would go to have a public hearing, incorporate what they think is valuable and what they need, and then they'll pass it on to the selectmen. We need to do that by January 20th on the critical path. If we don't, we're not going to make May unless we find some way ahead of that, after that, to catch up on the time we will lose. We never like to get behind on critical paths because it's very difficult to catch up, if not impossible. Next, the selectmen, when they receive it on January 20th, according to my rough estimate here, selectmen will hold a special meeting again, or a phone meeting or whatever, to approve and send a letter of approval to the Office of Policy Management. That's now we're getting up into the state and federal type responsibilities. I don't know exactly where that is, but it's probably the state. But by January 24th. So they only have 4 days there, and it's right around a critical time there. Maybe a big snow day there, but one way or another, they got to get it done. So they can have a meeting by email, by phone, in person, whatever they have to do to get that done. And then the OPM, this is out of our hands. That's why I say we need the air cover from all our representatives and anybody else we can get it from. They need to respond to the selectmen by January 7th. Now, I could give you a lot of examples of where I've done this in the past, including contacting the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, in one situation to help get me some air cover and a thing we were doing at the University of Kansas. But I don't have time right now, and maybe I can do that in future meetings. But what you got to do is get out there and get it done. Find people that can help you and work the system. And if all 7 selectmen have to go down there to the OPM and talk to people and bring the representatives along, whatever it takes, that's results orientation. They don't want to sit around giving us all excuses and reasons why they didn't make it. They want to make it. Okay, the next one is, when that happens, I'm saying the OPM, we gave them 2 weeks for the OPM to respond to the selectmen. It might take 3 months. I don't know what it'll take. But we better get down there and try to get back in 2 weeks so we can make our schedule. Selectmen then send an application for an extension to the DEP through the OPM by February 10th. And this is the best I understand it. Tomorrow somebody will say, hey, there's another step there, or you got that wrong, Brian, it really goes somewhere else. That's okay. I'm just trying to get across an idea here. That's all. This is an example, and my view would be tomorrow, if we get a change, we'll change this, and then we'll make it as accurate as we can as soon as we can, because we need to deal with facts. The next thing is, by February 10th, we hope to have that application for extension sent to the DEP. I'm not quite sure when we send that what we can do here, but we'll find out. And then the developer says that he wants 2 months. Once he gets all his approvals, he wants 2 months to be able to get ready to go into the ground. So that's April 10th. So right now, we got a little slack here. We're trying to go for May 1st, and it looks like we may be able to do it, if with a lot of luck, by April 10th. That gives us a little room there in case we slip a little bit. We still got some space. I'll show you that on my plan. Now, the next point I want to say is there are some other activities besides the critical path activities that we have to take into consideration. And I say, for better, they're non-critical path activities that are very important. And I say, for lack of a better word right now, that these necessary activities are things that need to get done in order to make, and they could become on the critical path if we're not careful. So we want to make sure they don't. And the first thing we need is, I need to say, is that we need the developer in the town to finalize the plans with the state concerning the water supply down the enterprise corridor to the state and developed property. That's already happening. I went to the last meeting. It was very positive, and they're going to come up with 3 letters, and they're going to try to resolve the problem. So that's moving along fine with Public Works and the Sewer and Water Commission and the developer. The next is the town and developer need to finalize a sewer plan, and down the enterprise corridor to the developer's property. And that's one of the things that's, we talked about the critical path. We need to get that critical path done so that we can do this number 2. But the town and the developer need to make up their own sub-plan on how they're actually going to do it here once the state approves. That's what that's all about. The next one is planning and zoning to review and approve Winchester Estates. They recently submitted it, came up at it's going to come up at, I think, some meeting in January, because it has to be a special permit, and a special permit requires public hearings and things like that. So The first meeting on that plan, you can get all the information, by the way, if you want, down. You can go down and get it from the town hall. I won't bring a big truck with you because there's a lot of drawings and a lot of paper, but there is a little summary there that you perhaps can get if you are interested in it. And I went down and I got some of the paperwork, but not all of it. So that needs to get through, and this is the second time. It was turned down once, it was denied. They have changed the plan, and it's in for approval, and they're going to go through that process. So I'll show you that on the plan. Then the inland wetlands needs to approve the Winchester Estate changes to the previously approved plan without public hearings. Now, if you remember in the past, I tell you that inland wetlands has already approved this plan, but since the developer is making some changes to satisfy P&Z because they're denied there, it has to go back through in the wetlands again. And they had a meeting the other night where these guys were last on the agenda. I think it came up around 11 o'clock at night or something. I'll talk about that separately if we get time. But the inland wetlands has decided, I saw in the paper at least, I don't sit through all their meetings. They go too long past my bedtime, and they should be done in an hour, and it takes them 4 or 5 hours ever to get through things. But the inland wetlands did say they would probably be able to consider this without having public hearings and big reviews and all that kind of thing. So some work will have to be done there. But I think we always expected that this would be the least of our problems on this. And when I say we, I mean we, the town, trying to get the development in. Not we, the developers. I have nothing to do with the developers. Now I'm going to show you a critical path. I'm hoping the guys that are handling the slides will be able to focus in on this. I did a big copy. A friend of mine saw a rough idea of what I was doing last week and said, you ought to make a red line on the critical path. So I've made it. And do you think you can focus this in for them? Let me know when you get it, and I'll start explaining it to them. Okay, I think you're going to see it right now. You did a good job with that, real quick, and I'm happy with that. Okay, this is an example of a CPM, critical path methods. Been around for a long, long time. One of the other techniques people used to use was PERT, which was like a program evaluation thing. But CPM is a computer package. I don't use it much by computer, but for our kind of projects, you don't need a computer. But basically, here it is. This is the critical path. And here's a timeline down here, January, February, March, and April. And here's all our activities I just talked about in here. This is all the activities along the critical path that we need to do to get the corridor thing done. And actually, I left it red there, but a red will stop. Once we get all our approvals, right about here, the red should stop. So I think I made a mistake there putting that red in. So up to here, it'll be red, and then it may or may not be red here. It depends on what happens over here. So what do we got? We've got all P&Z needs to do their first thing that I told you about, and then the select me to hold their special meeting or whatever. If it happens to fall on the night of one of their regular meetings, they can do it then. P&Z again gets it back, and they have the public hearing. I always want to say meeting, it's a hearing. And then the selectmen have to do their little thing again, and then the letter goes off to the DEP, and then when they approve it 2 weeks later or whatever, then the developer gets on with his long piece. We want to try to talk him into coming in closer if we can too, so we can get this done quicker. And then you got all the slack up here that if he should make it by April 10th, we got some 20 days there in case some of this doesn't make it on time. Now, what do we got here? We got inlands, wetlands to do their little thing they got to do with the new Winchester Estates application that they've got. And that needs to be done here before the developer is finished, because he needs his permit there to get started. The water down the corridor, that's being worked on quite successfully. That'll come in here. This has got a few complications with it, but nothing that they don't understand and won't do. And then there's the corridor itself, all those things. Then there's the sewer. We need to be able to have the plans with the town and the developer, how we're going to put the sewer in, and what size the pipe is going to be, and how all the technique. There's a plan for that. Now let me just say to you, first I'll finish this, and then we've got Winchester Estates, which is in P&Z now, and they're going to hold their first meeting on that on January something, 7th or 9th, or so I can never remember the exact dates, but somewhere up there, maybe even later than that. Whenever they have to there's certain rules about when you have public hearings. You got so many days in the newspaper, so many days. Then you got to have the meetings so many days before that. So after that, so that I don't know the exact date on, but it's somewhere up in the mid to end of January. And then that may or may not get approved. This may or may not get approved. If not, then we slip out on here. They come back in with new things, and that could go on forever. So we want to try to get things approved with conditions wherever we can. And I'm going to talk to you hopefully in a few minutes about how we can do that a little better. Okay, so that's what it is. Now, when this slips, it stays red. It stays red until we get all our permits. Then the developer will have to slip his, hopefully not farther than this slack. But if this thing slips 6 months, this is going to slip 6 months, right? So it's very important. Now, I'm going to turn this around because I'm using it for the backdrop of my slides. Thank you. And now I'm going to just say a little bit about the benefit of the approach. And the benefit of the approach is that this will force out the inevitable problems. Oh, you got to focus it again, huh? Okay. All right. Okay, this will force out the inevitable problems into the open in time to fix them before we slip. The whole game here, and it is a bit of a game, is to make sure we don't slip. And we have to do all kinds of things to make sure we don't slip. And what I used to do when I ran big programs, I'd go out and get pizzas for people and beer, keep them working, trying to encourage them to work nights and weekends and everything I could to keep on schedule. So a lot of things have to happen here, and we got to keep doing that. Next, once the critical path and other activities are planned, we must always be on the lookout for potential slippage. Remember, I told you in the techniques that visibility is very important and attention to detail is very important. And we must always be on the lookout for potential slippage and take action in time to stop it from occurring. Doesn't do any good after you slip. You got to stop. We're in intensive care. We've got to stop things before the patient dies, not after. It doesn't help any if that happens. So we got to be on the lookout. We got to have the monitors on. We got to have the monitor. We got to be watching it all the time. So I'll be watching on this program every week and keeping you up to date as best I can get the details from the town. Plenty of problems will happen. We know that. That's the approach. Evolution brings a lot of problems. There'll be a lot of problems. There'll be a lot of problems with revolution, too. Problem is you find them out too late. Here we're going to find them out quick enough. That's a reason for evolution. So you can force the problems out, recognize them if you're looking for them, and then fix them fast. That's the important thing. And if you're going off track and you find out your plan isn't exactly what you thought it should be, then you change your plan. It's that simple. Okay, the next, the approach will also help to speed up non-critical activities. So it's just as important, to watch for the non-critical activities and make sure they don't become critical activities. So you don't want the patient in intensive care to develop pneumonia, for example, or some other heart problem or some problem with his lungs. So you got to be on the lookout for all that while you're trying to fix the problem that he's got. So, or she's got, whoever. Okay, so that's very important. And I could talk for a week about all this stuff, but we don't have a week. So the activity to increase the probability that action will be taken before they become critical. So when the patient's in the critical room, then we watch for everything. And if we think it looks like his lungs are filling with water, we take some action and we do something about it to stop that. Okay, so that's important. And all the nurses have to be very diligent, and so do the doctors. Okay. Once the town is off the critical path, once we're off the critical path and developers on the critical path, we want to say, hey, we want to stay off the critical path. We want to make sure we get rid of all obstacles for the developer. So in a responsible way, of course, so that he won't have us to use as an excuse for slippage. Whenever you have one of these things that's tightly monitored, then everybody wants to find an excuse for slippage instead of trying to find a way to get the things done. So you got to keep, we call that in business peeling the layers of the onion, So you got to keep peeling the layers of the onion, and you got to eliminate excuses. Eliminate excuses, eliminate excuses. More excuses will come up than good ideas. I'll guarantee you on that. So we should be very diligent and strive to stay ahead of the game and not end up on the critical path ourselves. Now, it's inevitable that we will sometimes. But as soon as we do, red flag goes up, and we all move in the intensive care to get off the critical path again, okay? So now, I think I have about 10 minutes left. If you guys know how much time I've got, put up a little signal. But I'm going to now say, help. Okay, I got a little time. Good. I'm going to get into what I wanted to talk about. Help. We need help. Everybody needs help. And we're not ones to turn down help. We want help. So anybody who wants to give us help, providing it's going in the right direction and doesn't put us in jail or something, we want to accept help. And we want to do, as I told you once, the absolute value of everything. I showed you the absolute value mathematical symbol, and I told you that it's very important for we businessmen. So what I'm saying is we've got a lot of people in this community who could help us. And what I'm trying to say is, hey, let's ask them for help. John Grappo, he's still in the community. Everybody speaks very highly of John Grappo. A phone call to him once in a while, or if John Grappo can help us in any way with state officials and representatives, or even mentor some of the younger people here. I think John's in his 80s. I don't know him personally, but boy, he has a great reputation. Ann Harding, I think she's in her late 90s, but still very with it, so to speak, and she can be a big help to us. So if she can help us, that would be great. We should ask her for help. And if Jan, if you're out there listening, please volunteer to help, if you haven't already, and give us some advice. I've talked to Nancy Eisenlower many times. She now lives in Litchfield. Wonderful. And she could probably give us a lot of advice. She was mayor here, and she knows the town very well, and she can help mentor people and help us maybe through the state. I don't know. George Wilbur we know. Andrew Rohrbach we know. And then maybe there's other people. You people know more than I do. But any way we can get help, please, let's get some help. And anybody in town who thinks they can help should volunteer their services. And heaven knows everybody needs help. P&Z might need somebody to help them with things from between meetings. Please volunteer if you can. Please share your experience and wisdom by mentoring the less experienced members of the minority party especially. Let's all pull together to help the town resolve its financial difficulties and rebuild. And I'm thanking you in advance for that because I know you will do it. And that's what I'm doing here. It takes me about 60 hours every week to prepare this. I'm up all night because that's when I think best. My mind's clear. And if I get meetings, things in my head for these meetings, I can't sleep. So I get up and I do the work. And that's what a lot of people are doing. All these volunteers that are in town are doing their best. I would not question that. But if we can help them and make their job easier, when I do go to meetings, I hear a lot about how they're volunteers and they don't have enough time, and some of them have to get up early in the morning and all. So any help they can get would be appreciated. And I'm asking you to do that. Now, I want to talk a bit about meetings tonight, and I'm talking generically about meetings. So I think if I said in the past, the meeting I think is my example of probably need of most help. So I don't even go to their meetings anymore, as I said earlier, because I just can't take it. It's too much for me. So I'm going to put up this thing called efficient meetings. And as far as efficiency is concerned in meetings, I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can be more efficient. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to pay any attention. And in the past, nobody did anyway. But I just got to keep going because we got new people involved now. And I'm hoping that these new people can help us to recognize these things. And I don't think these will be strange to the people who are in business and who are used to running efficient meetings. And we do have several very efficient meetings run in this town. And I wouldn't want to say we don't. So I'm not trying to concentrate on those. I'm trying to concentrate on that aren't inefficient, especially if they're on our critical path. So in planning zoning, I've always thought was pretty efficiently run meeting. It could be improved like everything else. So here we go. Number one, set a time limit for a meeting, usually 1 hour or so. Set a time limit. Doesn't have to be an hour, it could be an hour and a half. Sometimes it's going to be 2 hours because you'll have a special thing. But in general, it should be an hour. If you don't set the time limit, just like a critical path, you're not going to make it, all right? The next is have various party experts meet between meetings and to resolve differences. You don't have to do it in the meeting. Meet between meetings. Talk between meetings. Get on the phone. Instead of going to the newspapers, talk to your counterparts. And talk so that these critical things don't just come up in a meeting, because that delays the meeting. We talk about a lot of things that aren't even on the policy list, and especially in the lower meetings. They waste a lot of time in those lower meetings talking about things that they shouldn't even be talking about. The next thing is a short report should be prepared for pre-meeting ready by the commissioners. So if people talk between the meetings, they should prepare a short little half page, and they should say that here we are, we talked about this, and we want to keep you abreast of it, or we need a decision from you, or whatever. Next, a list of decisions that you need from any commission. A list of decisions could be prepared that you come up with between the meetings. We need this. Now, that should be 0, because if you take and you get all the people from all the expertise together in these meetings, like, for example, if you've got the developers coming in, you get your own consultant, the town's consultant, to meet with the developer's consultant, and if there's any special consultants needed for specific things, they should meet, and they should resolve the problems between meetings. And then they should come to you and say, we resolved most of them, and we agree, and we have a couple more to go, or we need to present you with this one because you need to be involved in this decision. So that's all done outside the meetings. Presently now, that's all done inside the meetings, right? So that's the way it should be. Most of this stuff, presentations and all, shouldn't be done in the meeting. It should be bottom line. And in business, we have a thing called, give me the bottom line. Tell me the bottom line. What's the bottom line? We got other things to get on with here. We trust you experts. We want you to work together outside the meetings and tell us your opinions. That's why we hired you. The next is the town, by the way, all that information that these people come up with should be distributed prior to the meeting to the commissioners so they can read it, or the selectmen, they can read it, and they'll be up to date when they come to the meeting and don't have to hear it all over again. And they can boil it down to essential questions and speed the meeting up. The next is the town representative can and should attend these meetings, and a lot more, 95% of the time. The town manager, the town representatives, like the guy who coordinates the inland wetlands or the guy who coordinates the planning and zoning, they should be in these meetings with these experts, and they should know what's going on. Now, I've got to go speed up. I only got 3 minutes to go, and I got a lot more here, so I'll probably have to do it again some other time. But list the rules and delegates. I'll put it up here. You can read it quicker than I can speak it. But list the rules and delegates to the town representative 90% of the time. If you give him the rules, he can do most of his work between meetings and report. The representative can then send a report to the commissioners to read before the meeting. The meetings can be held by phone call or rarely during the meeting. Any questions can be answered before the meeting by people. If a rubber stamping is necessary for charter reasons or something, then it can be done at the meeting and should take little time. Grandstanding should not be allowed at meetings. I see a lot of people in meetings trying to show you how much they know about things when they don't know anything at all, or very little. So, and that's very apparent usually when they talk about these things. So let's not allow, the chairman shouldn't allow any grandstanding. That should be kept to a minimum. We don't care about the past and why somebody didn't do this 10 years ago or 5 years ago. That doesn't help us move forward. The next is to choose a chairman that has to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. If you choose a chairman that has to get up 5 a.m. in the morning, that might help you to go to work. That will help keep the meeting short. I'll guarantee you on that. If something needs to be placed in the record, have it done in writing form with a brief as brief as the law allows, and a summary given to the meeting only if necessary. The smaller the commission, the briefer the meeting. Other suggestions are followed, if the other suggestions are followed. That's Brian's rule. You might not agree with that, but I think smaller meetings and smaller commissions is better because then you don't have to listen to everybody talk about little things. And then if attorney's advice is needed, have the town representative get outside the meeting, talk to the lawyers, and then present it in writing to the committee so they don't have to sit and listen to the lawyer. And with that, I'm out of time now. It's been a great meeting. We're really moving as a town. Tickle pink with the way we're going. It looks like we're going to get off this critical path hopefully in the next few months, and we're going to get on with it, and we're going to see the light of the day. And as the railroad guys used to say, I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. See you next week.